Do you believe that a simple act of kindness can change someone's destiny forever? Sometimes what seems like just a common gesture, done without expecting anything in return, is exactly what the universe uses to transform an entire life. And it was like that on a random afternoon, that a poor mechanic, with his hands dirty with grease and his heart full of hope, found the path that would lead him to something he would never have imagined. A check for $1 million signed by a billionaire woman who he had helped without asking for anything in return. Michael lived on the edge between survival and dream. His small workshop, hidden on the outskirts of town, was more than a business. It was the last bit of dignity he still possessed. The oil-stained walls, the sound of old engines, and the constant smell of gasoline were part of the routine that, although harsh, represented everything he had. Each client was a chance to keep fighting, to pay another month's rent, to buy medicine for his sick mother. He wasn't rich, but he had something that many millionaires never knew: honesty and faith that good, somehow, always comes back. As the sun set that day, Michael was wiping his hands with a torn cloth when he heard the sound of an engine sputtering in the distance. A luxury car, silver and impeccable, stopped in front of his workshop. The contrast was almost comical. That vehicle seemed to belong to another world, a world of billionaires, expensive events and streets he would never set foot on. From the car, an elegant woman got out, dressed in an expensive coat, sunglasses, and a cold look. She observed the workshop as if observing a place forgotten by time. "The car stopped working," she said, in a distant, almost impatient tone. Michael nodded, undeterred. "May I take a look at it?" She hesitated for a moment, perhaps suspicious that this simple man could touch something so valuable. But something in his expression, maybe the calm, maybe the humility, made her give in. He opened the hood, diving into his work with the precision of someone who understands what he's doing. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the sound of tools. As he repaired the car, the woman watched, intrigued. That mechanic didn't ask questions, didn't complain, didn't try to impress. He just did what was right. In a world driven by interest and appearance, his simplicity disarmed her. When the engine roared again, she opened her purse and took out the card. "How much do I owe you?" Michael just smiled. "Nothing." She frowned. "What do you mean, nothing? Sometimes people need help, and today you were the one who needed it." The answer left her speechless. Nobody said that to her. No one did anything without expecting something in return. For the first time in a long time, Lauren, a billionaire surrounded by contracts, power, and loneliness, felt something different: true gratitude. Michael walked away, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You can go now. It's all right." She hesitated, looking at him with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. And for an instant, her cold gaze disappeared. He didn't know it, but that simple moment had planted the seed of something extraordinary. Lauren got in the car and drove away without saying anything else, but inside her, something echoed. That man's generosity had crossed layers that money had never reached. And as the car disappeared down the road, Michael returned to his routine, without imagining that that unpretentious gesture was about to change everything. But fate sometimes rewards the purest of hearts, in ways no one could predict. Sometimes stories like this seem far from our reality, don't they? But that's exactly why they touch so many people, because deep down, we all want to believe that there is still goodness in the world, that simple gestures done in silence can come back in ways we can't even imagine. And that's what this story will show you. So before we continue, I want to ask you something important. Leave a like if you believe that good always comes back, because this helps a lot, so that more people know stories like this. And more than that, comment below. Do you believe that there is a reward for those who do the right thing, even when no one is watching? I really want to know your opinion, because every comment, every point of view, is part of this community that grows every day. When you dare leave your comment down, You show that you understand the message, and when you just subscribe to the channel, you decide to walk along, helping to spread stories that inspire, move, and remind us of what really matters. Here, each story is a reflection of something greater, of empathy, of courage, of humanity. So, before you follow, do this now. Like, comment, and subscribe. Because the most exciting part is yet to come. What happened to Michael after that day wasn't luck. It was the result of a heart attack. Action that remained pure, even when everything around him tried to harden him. And while he believed that meeting had been just another in his tired routine as a mechanic, destiny was already writing the chapter that would change everything. Michael woke up before sunrise, as he did every day. The alarm clock didn't even need to go off, because the mind was already used to the weight of the routine. The morning cold entered through the cracks in the broken windows of the small house he shared with his mother, and the sound of the wind sounded like a constant reminder that life there had never been easy. His hands, marked by cuts and grease, were testimony to a lifetime dedicated to fixing other people's problems, while his own always seemed to be an afterthought. He looked up at the ceiling and took a deep breath. One more day. Another engine to open, another customer to try to convince to pay what is fair. The workshop, located on the outskirts, was simple and small. The faded sign said, "Michael's Auto Repair." But what really caught your attention was the sound of the engines, the strong smell of oil, and the pile of forgotten bills on the counter. Michael turned on the old radio, which still worked, despite the constant hiss. The music was old, but it brought a certain comfort, as if each note said, "Hang in there." He put on his stained overalls, tied his hair with an elastic band, and opened the metal door. The sun rose slowly, painting the cracked asphalt and the silent neighborhood gold. The first customer arrived shortly after 7, a neighbor with the same old car and the same complaint. "Do that miracle for me, Mike, but don't overcharge me." He smiled, because he already knew that the money wouldn't come in full. But he did the job anyway. What else could you do? He believed that every good deed came back in some form. That was his philosophy, and it was precisely this belief that would later open the door to the unexpected. As I worked, I thought about the night before. The expensive car, the mysterious woman, the look in her eyes before leaving. That kept echoing in his head. He knew he wasn't the type of man to attract the attention of a woman like her, a billionaire, probably used to gala dinners and not grease-covered workshops. Still, there was something about that moment, something silent and powerful, a simple gesture that seemed to have meant more to her than to him. Perhaps because, in a world where everything has a price, you don't have to pay, would become an almost miraculous act. During the morning, the hours passed slowly. With each customer who entered, Michael repeated the same tired smile, the same kind words. But deep down, I felt a different weight, a feeling. The memory of the rich woman, of her look, made him wonder if that meeting had truly ended. He didn't know that destiny was already in motion, that that woman would return, not with a broken car, but with something he would never have imagined holding in his hands. At noon, heat took over the neighborhood. Michael closed the shop for a few minutes to have lunch. Lunch was simple, rice, beans, and a little chicken, enough to sustain a tired body. He looked at the photograph of his mother pinned to the wall, smiling. "One day things will get better, Mom, I promise." He had said this phrase since he was a boy, and even if his promises weren't kept, he never stopped repeating it. The afternoon was more difficult. The phone rang non-stop, and the power failed twice. The old welding machine sparked, and sweat ran down his face. The body got tired, but the mind remained firm. Because for him, giving up was not an option. He was a man of principles, and honesty was the engine that moved him, even when everything seemed broken around him. Across town, Lauren, the billionaire he had helped, also couldn't get that man out of her head. Used to meetings, investments, and dinners with people who talked more about profits than feelings, she found herself thinking about a stranger who fixed cars with his own hands and talked about help as if it still had value. There was something about that mechanic that reminded her of her father, a man who valued hard work and believed that money only had meaning when it could change someone's life. But Lauren had strayed from that ideal a long time ago, suffocated by the pressure to be perfect, to maintain the family fortune, to hide the loneliness that luxury brought. As she watched the city through the window of her luxurious apartment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: guilt. That man didn't want anything from her. Not recognition, not money. It just helped. And this, for someone who lived in a world of interests and appearances, was something deeply disturbing. That night she picked up the phone and called her assistant. He asked me to find information about the mechanic at the small workshop on the outskirts. Back at the workshop, Mikey L. was finishing a repair when he heard a different sound. A car coming to a slow stop, but not just any car. The same engine, the same metallic shine that he would never forget. The heart accelerated. He wiped his hands on the cloth and went out to see. There she was, Lauren again. This time without the sunglasses. Her gaze was direct, intense, and there was something vulnerable in her posture. Michael stood still, not knowing what to say. She smiled slightly. "I needed to thank you." "You already thanked me," he replied, trying to hide his nervousness. "No, not as it should." The silence that formed was almost palpable. The difference between the two worlds they represented seemed to diminish for an instant. He, a simple man, with hands marked by work. She, a rich woman, marked by the lack of something that money could never buy. Lauren stepped forward and held out her hand. "Can I come in?" Michael hesitated for a second, but made room. Of course. As she entered, the smell of grease and metal filled the room. It was the opposite of the expensive perfume she wore, but somehow that contrast felt natural. Lauren looked around, taking in every detail of the workshop. There was something honest about it, a kind of truth she didn't find in her plush offices. "Is this where you work every day?" he asked. "Yeah. It's not much, but it's what pays the bills." She smiled. "And yet, he fixed my car for free." He shrugged. "Money isn't always what solves everything. Sometimes what we need is just someone who cares." The sentence hit her like a silent punch. She looked at him with teary eyes, but quickly covered it up. "You have no idea how much that sentence means to me." Michael didn't understand the weight of those words, but he felt that something inside her was changing. And maybe you've also experienced something like this, when a simple gesture makes someone look at you in a different way, as if they saw something in you that the whole world had ignored. Have you been through this? Comment below. I've experienced something similar, because it's from this type of moment that the stories that touch the heart most are born. Lauren took a deep breath, looked around once again, and said something that would change everything. "I don't think I've repaid you the right way yet." And what happened after that sentence? No one there was prepared to testify. Michael was silent for a few seconds, trying to decipher what Lauren meant with those words. The billionaire woman, elegant and accustomed to luxury, was now there, standing in the middle of her simple workshop, looking at him with something that seemed to surpass gratitude. It was as if she was searching for something deeper, perhaps a meaning that money had never been able to buy. He wiped his hands nervously and responded naturally, without understanding that, at that exact moment, his life was truly beginning to change. "I didn't do it out of retribution," he said, trying to break the silence that was beginning to weigh heavily on the air. "I just did what anyone should do." Lauren watched him intently, as if his every word revealed a fragment of something she herself had lost. Her gaze was more human, less cold. For the first time, he looked vulnerable. She walked to one of the shelves, running her fingers over the tools, and said in a low tone, "Most people don't do anything without expecting something in return. You're different, Michael." He looked away, embarrassed. I think the world would be better if more people were different. The simple comment sounded like a confession. Lauren nodded, still deep in her own thoughts. In that instant, she understood that it wasn't just the car that had broken down that day. It was something inside her too. And perhaps, in some strange way, that humble mechanic had fixed both. A light wind blew in through the open door, stirring up the dust and rustling the papers on the counter. The scene seemed charged with something bigger, something that neither of them could explain. Michael tried to stay focused, but her presence disconcerted him. He had never spoken to someone on that level, someone who came from a world where every word was measured and every gesture had intention. And yet, here, in that dirty, simple workshop, she finally seemed free of it all. Lauren broke the silence. "Do you believe in destiny, Michael?" He laughed lightly. "I believe in hard work." She smiled for the first time. "What if destiny was a different form of work?" "I think destiny is just us trying to give names to things we don't understand," he replied. "Sometimes what seems like destiny is just the result of doing the right thing when no one else wants to do it." Lauren was silent, absorbing every word. What he said seemed simple, but it had the weight of truth. Maybe that's why it hurt so much. She walked to the door, as if she was going to leave, but stopped. "Are you back?" and asked, "Have you always been like this? So sure of what is right?" Michael took a deep breath. "I don't know if I'm right. I just learned that if you lose what you have on the inside, it doesn't matter what you have on the outside." That answer echoed inside her like a forgotten memory. Lauren turned around, but before leaving, she left a small envelope on the counter. "This is for you." He looked, confused. "What is that?" "Only open it when you feel like it," she said, with an enigmatic look before getting into the car and driving away. The car's engine sounded loudly as she drove away, leaving behind the faint scent of perfume and a sense of mystery that filled the air. Michael stood there, standing still, watching the car disappear over the horizon, not knowing if that moment was real or a dream. The envelope was still on the table, untouched, and curiosity was consuming him. But there was something in her voice, in the way she said, "When you feel like it," that made him wait. The hours passed. The workshop became empty. The sun began to set, and shadows took the place of light. He finally sat down, tired, and stared at the envelope. It was white, simple, with nothing written on it. No symbol, no clue, just the light weight of something unknown. For a moment he thought about throwing it away, but his mind insisted, "What if this is important?" He took a deep breath and carefully opened the paper. Inside there was just a sheet folded in half and a small golden card. The card read, "Whitmore Industries, Private Division." The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember where. He opened the paper and began to read. "Michael, you may never know how much your gesture meant to me. I grew up in a world where people only act out of self-interest, where nothing is given without return. And for a brief moment, you showed me that there is still true kindness. I can't pay you for what you've done, because what you've done is priceless. But I can invite you to something that might change your life. Come to the address on the back of this card tomorrow at 10 a.m. Lauren." Michael read those words several times, as if trying to understand if they were real. The invitation seemed absurd, a mechanic from the outskirts being called to go to a billion-dollar company. Why? He placed the paper on the counter and stared into space. The curiosity was enormous, but so was the fear. What if it was a trap? What if she was just being polite? Or worse, what if it was an elegant form of humiliation? The head was spinning, the heart was beating fast. His mind searched for reasons not to go, but something stronger was pushing him in the opposite direction. Maybe it was just hope, the same hope that kept him standing every day. During the night, sleep did not come. Michael thought about the woman, about her words, about the expensive necklace that glittered around her neck. He also thought about how she had looked at him, as someone who, for a second, saw him not as a poor mechanic, but as a human being worthy of respect. Across town, Lauren wasn't sleeping either. Atop the Whitmore Industries building, she faced the view of a city that seemed increasingly distant from her. The memory of Michael haunted her. The way he talked about principles, about what really has value, made her rethink everything. She opened the drawer and took out an old photograph, her father, covered in grease, holding her as a child in a workshop similar to Michael's. That man, the company's founder, had started from nothing. And now she saw in the poor mechanic the reflection of everything her father had once been. The next morning, Michael woke up early. He saw the card on the table and knew what he needed to do. He took a quick shower, put on the best clothes he had, a clean but worn shirt, and went out, his heart racing. The city seemed bigger than ever. Each mirrored building reflected the difference between his world and her world. When he arrived at the entrance to Whitmore Industries, the security guards looked him up and down, surprised to see a simple man there. "I have a date with Miss Lauren," I said, trying to sound confident. One of them checked a list and nodded. "You can come in, Mr. Michael." He crossed the immense lobby, his eyes wide at the sight of so much luxury. The white marbles, the golden panels, the people scurrying around in expensive suits. It all seemed like another planet. And in the midst of it all, he felt like an outsider. But there was something inside him, a calm voice that said, "You are here for a reason." While waiting for the elevator, he looked at his own reflection in the glass and thought about everything he had experienced. The poverty, the difficulties, the days when I wanted to give up. Everything had prepared him for that moment. The doors opened, and a secretary led him to a large room on the top floor. Inside, the smell was different, not of gasoline but of power, and sitting at the table was Lauren, with a soft smile and a look that mixed gratitude and curiosity. "I thought you wouldn't come," she said. Michael took a deep breath, feeling like he was about to enter a chapter of life he never imagined living. "And this is where I ask you, if it were you, would you go to this meeting or would you let fear stop you? Write in the comments. I would go, even without knowing what to expect, because it is exactly in the most unlikely decisions that destiny usually reveals itself." Michael stood still for a few seconds, watching Lauren behind that huge glass table. The contrast between the two worlds had never been so clear. She, impeccable, wearing an expensive blazer with an air of natural authority. He was simple, with a curious and humble look, trying to understand what he was really doing there. His heart was pounding, not out of fear but out of uncertainty. I felt like something big was about to happen, but I didn't know if it was a good thing. Lauren invited him to sit, and the sound of her heels echoed across the marble floor, firm, confident, like someone used to commanding entire rooms. "I don't usually receive people here," she said, folding her hands on the table. "But in your case, I thought I should make an exception." Michael smiled slightly, without understanding. "I don't know what I did to deserve this." "You did what no one else would do," she replied, looking him straight in the eyes. "He helped someone without wanting anything in return." He looked away, a little uncomfortable with the compliment. "I only did what I thought was right." "That's exactly why you're here," she added, "because doing the right thing nowadays is rare." The phrase hung in the air like a compliment and a criticism at the same time. Michael felt the weight of those words, but he didn't know how to react. He adjusted himself in his chair, trying to hide his tension. Lauren got up and went to the glass window, where she could see the entire city. "You know, Michael, I grew up believing that money solved everything, that all you had to do was pay for things to be fixed. But what you did reminded me of something I had long forgotten, the value of kindness." He watched her, surprised. "Sometimes you have to lose to remember what matters," he replied. She turned and smiled. "You speak as if you have already lost a lot." Michael took a deep breath. "I lost enough to understand that some things don't come back, but I also learned that what we do for others, that stays." Lauren was silent, visibly touched. Those words seemed to reach something inside her that had been dormant for a long time. He walked to the table again and opened a leather folder. From there, he took out an envelope, the same one he had left in the workshop, and placed it on the table. "What's in there could change your life," she said, observing his reaction. Michael looked at the envelope warily. "I don't know if I want to change my life with something I don't understand." "What if it's a chance to start over?" she asked. "An opportunity you deserve." He hesitated, but curiosity was inevitable. He opened the envelope slowly and found a contract. The Whitmore Industries logo was on the cover. He read the first few lines and was confused. It was a partnership proposal. "That must be wrong," he said, frowning. "I'm not an engineer, I'm not a businessman, I don't understand anything about this kind of thing." Lauren approached, leaning on the table. "I don't want you to be anything like that. I want you to be who you are." He looked at her, without understanding. "And what does that mean?" "Whitmore is losing its essence," he explained. "My father founded this company believing in people, but over the years we became everything he hated, cold, greedy, distant from reality. When I met you, I realized that maybe there are still people who remind me why this all started." Michael was silent. Her words touched him, but they also scared him. He wasn't used to that kind of confidence, especially coming from someone like her. "Do you want me to work for you?" he asked finally. "I want you to work with me," Lauren corrected. "I want to reform a sector of the company and make it accessible to small workshops, a project to support independent mechanics. I can handle the money, but you understand people. I need someone to bring humanity back to what I do." He shook his head, trying to process everything. "I don't know if I'm prepared for something like that. I'm just a mechanic," Lauren smirked. "And I'm just someone trying to fix what's broken. I think we have something in common." The silence between the two was interrupted by the sound of a notification on the computer. Lauren glanced quickly, but something in her expression changed. For a moment her gaze hardened, as if remembering something unpleasant. "Everything is fine?" Michael asked. She took a deep breath. "Yes, just family business." But her voice said otherwise. The name Whitmore seemed to bring back memories she preferred to keep buried. Still, he tried to hide it and resumed his light tone. "So, Michael, what do you say?" He thought for a few seconds. "I can try, but only if I can continue to be who I am." "That's precisely why I want you here," she replied sincerely. He signed the contract, feeling his hands shaking. "I had never signed anything so important in my life." When he looked up, Lauren was watching him with a real smile, the kind of smile someone gives when they truly believe in something. "Welcome to Whitmore Industries," she said, extending her hand. Michael squeezed, still completely unsure of what that meant. At that moment, their fates became intertwined for good. The billionaire woman and the poor mechanic were about to begin a journey that would challenge everything they knew about generosity, power, and humanity. The following days were a whirlwind. Michael started to visit the company, getting to know each sector, each employee. People looked at him strangely. After all, who was that man in simple clothes walking next to the CEO? Comments flowed through the halls, but Lauren didn't care. She knew what she was doing. Michael also felt the weight of distrust. Some directors treated him with veiled contempt. One of them, in particular, caught attention. Thomas Reed, Lauren's right-hand man, a cold, calculating man who saw Michael as a threat. One afternoon, Thomas approached him in the parking lot. "Some advice, mechanic," he said in an ironic tone. "This place is not for people like you." Michael remained calm. "And maybe that's why this place needs people like me." Thomas laughed, but there was anger behind that smile. "We'll see how long your naivety lasts." That meeting planted something inside Michael. Not fear, but a feeling. Something told him the path ahead would be more dangerous than he imagined. Over the next few days, Lauren and he began working together on the new project. They spent hours discussing ideas, visiting workshops, listening to stories of simple people who struggled to survive honestly. With each conversation, the bond between them grew. Lauren began to see in Michael not just an employee, but a living reminder of everything she had lost. empathy, purpose, truth. Michael, in turn, saw in Lauren a woman who, behind all the wealth and power, carried a silent loneliness. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, he would see her scanning the horizon through the window, as if searching for something she couldn't buy. And maybe that's why the most different people understand each other, because pain, loneliness, and the search for meaning don't choose social class. But there was someone who couldn't bear to see it growing up, Thomas. And what he would do behind the scenes would be the start of a new conflict, capable of putting everything that Michael and Lauren had built at risk. Now tell me, do you believe that destiny brings people together by chance, or that each meeting has a hidden purpose? Comment below. Nothing is by chance. If you believe that even the most unlikely paths can change an entire life. Thomas Reed wasn't the kind of man who accepted losing control easily. Ever since Michael had joined the company, something inside him seemed to eat away at the patience he had cultivated for years. He had always been Lauren's right-hand man, the cool strategist who kept affairs in order and appearances perfect. But now he saw that poor mechanic walking through the corridors of Whitmore Industries as if he belonged there, being greeted with smiles, gaining the CEO's trust, and that irritated him in a way that he himself couldn't disguise. In the early days, Thomas tried to act diplomatically. He observed from afar, tested, asked disguised questions, pretended kindness. But he soon realized that the danger was not in Michael's naivety, but in what he awakened in Lauren. It was as if this simple man had the power to remind her of everything she tried to forget. The old values, the human side, the heart she had buried under tons of reports and meetings. And for Thomas, this was a direct threat. He had spent years molding Lauren for the world of billionaires, strict, rational, calculating. And now, within days, a mechanic was undoing everything. Michael, on the other hand, had no idea the scale of what was happening. He was still himself, authentic, kind, and attentive to details that no one else saw. He watched employees being treated coldly, noticed the silent fear in the hallways, and wondered how such a large company could have forgotten what it meant to work together. Sometimes after work, he would stay late talking to the maintenance mechanics, listening to stories, helping to repair equipment, getting his hands dirty without caring about the suit they had given him. And that was exactly what made Lauren admire him still. Give that man more. One afternoon, Lauren personally went down to the production floor, something she hadn't done in years. When he arrived, he saw Michael sitting on the floor, surrounded by employees, teaching one of them how to adjust a safety valve. Everyone seemed to be smiling, something rare in that place. She watched from afar for a few minutes, without anyone noticing. For the first time in a long time, he felt genuine pride, not for the money, not for the numbers, but for what he saw happening before him, people believing in what they were doing again. But not everyone saw that positively. Thomas, upon realizing what was happening, decided to act. The next day, he entered Lauren's office with a stack of documents and a calculatedly worried tone. "Lauren, I need to talk to you about your new protégé." He used the word with venom in his voice, although he maintained a cold smile. She looked up from the computer. "Michael, what does he have?" "I did some checks." He spread papers on the table. "This partnership with someone without a business background can be risky. You know how the advice goes. They are already questioning their decisions." Lauren interrupted him firmly. "The council has questioned me since I learned to walk. That doesn't worry me." Thomas bowed slightly. "And it should. They think you are letting feelings get in the way of decisions. And honestly, they're not completely wrong." She took a deep breath, irritated. "If the council is worried because I decided to help an honest man, then perhaps the problem is not with me, but with them." He kept his tone calm, but his gaze hardened. "I'm just trying to protect you." Lauren stood up slowly, walking to the window. "You're not trying to protect me, Thomas. You're trying to protect the control you've always had." The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. He didn't respond, just watched her for a moment before leaving the room. But in that look, there was a promise, and it wasn't one of giving up. In the following days, strange rumors began to circulate around the company. Some said Michael was taking advantage of the CEO's generosity. Others said he had been hired out of pity. Little lies, whispered in the hallways, crafted with precision to erode reputations. And as always with rumors, the more false they were, the faster they spread. Michael began to feel the looks change. People who had previously greeted him now turned their faces away. He tried to ignore it, but the weight was visible. One afternoon he met Lauren in the elevator and noticed that she also seemed tired, more tense than usual. "Everything is fine?" he asked. She hesitated. "Sometimes I forget that power attracts people and monsters." Michael smiled slightly, trying to lighten the mood. "So we better learn to recognize monsters before they devour us." She looked at him with a mixed expression of gratitude and sadness. "You speak like someone who has already been eaten once," he replied in a low tone, "and I lived to tell the story." The elevator stopped, and the two got out, without noticing that Thomas was watching from a distance, with a look of pure calculation. That night, Thomas sent an anonymous email to one of the company's shareholders, attaching doctored documents that made it appear that Michael had received improper deposits, an attempt to defame him. The plan was simple: discredit the mechanic, turn Lauren against him, and regain control of the situation. But what Thomas didn't expect was that Lauren knew enough about forgeries to see through the scam. 2 days later, she walked into his office without warning. He threw the documents on the table. "Did you really think I would fall for this?" Thomas tried to maintain his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You know, yes." She approached, looking at him. And then if you do that again, you'll find out what happens to those who try to destroy someone out of envy." He sneered. "Envy? I don't envy a mechanic. Then why does he bother you so much?" she asked firmly. Thomas didn't respond. I knew I lost that round, but inside him resentment grew. Meanwhile, Michael continued his work, without imagining the size of the storm that was forming around him. The relationship between him and Lauren became increasingly close, not in a romantic sense, but in something deeper, more human. They began to understand each other in silence, to share ideas, to dream of a project that could transform Whitmore into something different from what it had always been. But trust is like glass. All it takes is one crack for it to start breaking. And Thomas knew exactly where to press. A few days later, during an important meeting, he presented a false proposal, claiming to be Michael's idea. The plan was to make him appear incompetent to the board. Lauren, surprised, looked at her friend. Michael, without understanding, tried to expose himself a lick, but the damage was already done. The silence that followed was awkward. When the meeting was over, she called him in private. "Michael, please tell me that's not true." "I swear, Lauren, I never presented any of this." His look was sincere, but the emotional damage had already been done. She sighed, exhausted. "I want to believe you," he replied firmly. "Then believe me, because if we lose that, the project ends." She was silent, staring at him. It was clear that she was torn between reason and instinct. Deep down, she knew he was telling the truth, but the fear of making mistakes, of trusting too much, made her hesitate. Michael left the room with a heavy heart. I knew Thomas was behind it, but I had no proof, and the cruelest thing was that, even without proof, doubt had already set in. That was the first time he felt that his dream was in danger. Not just the project, but the trust, the bond, what was pure about that alliance. And it is at this point that life tests the faith of those who believe in goodness, because when lies dress up as truth, even the most honest heart shakes. Now tell me, if you were in Michael's place, would you continue fighting even though you know that someone powerful wants to destroy you? Comment below. I wouldn't give up. To show that you also believe that the truth always wins, even when everything seems against it. That night, Michael returned home in silence. The city seemed colder than usual, and even the wind that blew through the streets seemed to carry a strange weight. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, his mind spinning around Lauren's last words. "I want to believe you." That phrase echoed repeatedly in his head, like a mixture of hope and pain. He knew she hadn't condemned him, but she hadn't defended him either. And that hurt more than any direct offense. When I got home, the light in the living room was off, but the television was still playing an old program. The mother slept on the sofa, covered with the same worn blanket as always. He watched her for a moment and felt his heart sink. Everything he did for her. Every sacrifice, every extra hour, every difficult choice. He went to the kitchen, got a glass of water and stood still, staring at the reflection in the window glass. It felt like seeing a stranger looking back, a man who fought to do right, but who began to realize that the world sometimes doesn't reward the righteous. The next morning, the phone rang early. It was Lauren. Her voice was different, cold, controlled. She asked him to go to the company, but without giving details. The tone indicated that something serious awaited him. Michael arrived on time, even though his stomach was churning with anxiety. In the main hall, he felt the eyes weighing down on him. People whispered, diverted, commented quietly. They already knew. The rumor of the alleged fraud had spread. When he entered the meeting room, he found Lauren standing next to Thomas and other board executives. The atmosphere was tense. On the table, a pile of reports and contracts. Lauren looked at him for a moment, but didn't smile. "Michael," she began in a professional tone, "we need to clarify some things." He nodded, trying to remain calm. "Of course." Thomas took the floor with that cynical tone of someone who has already rehearsed each sentence. "We analyzed documents that link your name to unauthorized financial transactions. These are transfers coming from a secondary account. Do you want to explain this?" Michael looked at the papers, confused. "This is a mistake. I never had access to company accounts." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Even so, the money ended up in yours." "So someone put it there," he replied. "Someone who wants to take me down." The silence that formed was heavy. Lauren watched him, trying to find the same spark of honesty in his words that she had seen since day one. But the fear of being deceived was also real. She took a deep breath, trying to remain neutral. "We need proof, Michael." He looked at her. "You already have the proof." "I am the proof. You know who I am." The pain in his voice disarmed her for a moment, but the board was waiting for a decision. Thomas crossed his arms, satisfied with the way things were going. "Until everything is clarified," Lauren said in a lower tone, "it would be best if you stay away from the project." The words fell like a sentence. Michael felt the floor disappear. He just nodded with a blank look. He left the room in silence, while Thomas watched him with a discreet smile. The kind of smile that only cowards give when they believe they have won. Outside, the hallway seemed longer than ever. Each step echoed as a reminder that trust, when broken, is harder to repair than any engine. He left the building without looking back. That night, the rain fell heavily. Michael walked aimlessly, his clothes soaked, his dog heavy feed. The sound of drops mixed with the distant noise of traffic. He passed by the closed workshop and remembered who he was before all that, before the company, before the sudden fame. Just a mechanic who believed that good would come back. But what if the world didn't really work like that? As he walked, he saw a man trying to push a broken-down car onto the shoulder. He stopped for a moment. You could just follow along, pretend you didn't see it. But something inside him stopped him. He approached and asked if he needed help. The man explained that the engine had suddenly stopped. Michael bent down, looked at the hood, and, within minutes, managed to get the car running again. The driver thanked him, but before he could offer money, Michael smiled. "Don't worry, friend. Sometimes we help just because it's right." As the car drove away, he felt a lump in his throat. He realized that even though he was injured, he couldn't stop being who he was. They could take away his job, his reputation, but they couldn't take away his essence. Across town, Lauren wasn't sleeping either. He spent hours analyzing the documents. Something didn't make sense. The reports were well done, perhaps too well. The signatures looked identical, but there were small details that only someone who really knew Michael would notice. The man she knew would never make such a silly mistake, and the moves seemed designed to look perfect. And perfection, she knew, was a sign of falsification. The next morning, she called the head of finance. He asked direct questions, demanded access to the original records, and ordered the audit to be reopened. Thomas found out and tried to stop it, but it was too late. Lauren was determined to find out the truth. Meanwhile, Michael spent his days in silence. He returned to the workshop, but it was abandoned, covered in dust. The bills piled up, and hope was rare. Even so, he tried to repair his neighbor's small cars to survive. Every engine he started felt like a metaphor for what he wanted to do with his life, fix what was broken. One afternoon, he heard the sound of footsteps at the entrance. When he looked, he didn't believe it. Lauren was there, wearing simple clothes, no security guards, no corporate mask. "I thought you didn't want to see me anymore," he said, without hiding his bitterness. "I thought I knew you well enough to know when I was wrong," she replied sincerely. Michael wiped his hands and waited for her to continue. "I reopened the case," he explained. "I discovered that everything was forged, and I found out who did it." He watched her, trying to contain his anger. "Thomas?" She nodded. "Yes. He tried to manipulate me into believing you deceived me." Michael laughed bitterly. "And he did for a while." Lauren looked down. "I deserve to hear this." The silence that followed was tense, but filled with truth. She walked over and placed an envelope on the counter. "This is what you should have received for the project. And, more than that, I want you to come back. The company needs you." Michael looked at the envelope, then at her. "It's not about money, Lauren. It never was." "I know," she replied. "But maybe now you understand that sometimes the power is not in the money, but in who decides what to do with it." For a moment, the two just stared at each other. There was something different about that exchange of glances. It wasn't romanticism, it was something rarer, true respect. But before they could continue, a noise in the street interrupted them. A black car parked in front of the workshop. Two men in suits got out and walked towards the door. Lauren recognized them immediately. They were from Thomas's team. She looked at Michael, alarmed. "I think he found out I was looking for you." Michael turned to the window, tense. "What does he want now?" "Controlling what you can't," she replied. "And if I'm right, he won't stop until he succeeds." Michael took a deep breath. "Then come." The sound of knocks on the door echoed through the workshop, each one louder than the last. Lauren looked him in the eyes. "Do you trust me?" He nodded. "I trust." "Then get ready, because the truth is about to cost much more than we imagine." And before she could say anything else, the door was kicked down. Now tell me here in the comments, if you were in Michael's shoes, would you face the powerful to prove the truth, or would you leave everything behind and start over? Right, I would fight for the truth, and show that you believe that even the poorest can beat the system when they have the right heart. The door opened with a bang that echoed throughout the entire workshop, making Michael's heart race. The metallic sound of the hinges mixed with the echo of the firm steps that crossed the cement floor. Two men dressed in black entered first, followed by Thomas Reed. He wore the same impeccable suit as always, but the look in his eyes now he carried something different, a mixture of anger and fear. Lauren took a step forward, trying to stay calm. Michael remained by her side, firm, even without knowing what was about to happen. Thomas didn't waste time on formalities. "So this is where the saving mechanic hides." His tone was pure provocation. "And you, Lauren, did you personally come to get your hands dirty?" Lauren crossed her arms. "I came to seek the truth, Thomas, something you seem to have forgotten a long time ago." He laughed, but there was a hidden tremor in his voice. "The truth. The truth is that you are destroying everything your father built. This company was not created for charity, It was created for profit. And now he's ruining everything because of a man who fixes cars. Michael took a deep breath, trying to contain his anger. What destroys a company is not kindness, Thomas. It's corruption. Thomas's smile disappeared for a moment. Be careful what you say. Or what? Are you going to invent another story to keep me away? Michael countered, taking a step forward. You did it once and look where we are now. The two men in suits moved slightly, as if waiting for an order. Lauren raised her hand, stopping the advance. No one will touch him, he said in a firm tone. If you want to resolve this, you'll have to do it the right way. Thomas gave a short, sarcastic laugh. The right way? In your fantasy world, perhaps. In reality, power wins. Lauren slowly approached him. So tell me, Thomas, if power wins, why do you look so desperate? He was silent for a moment, and that was enough to show that she was right. Lauren had prepared something, a coup he hadn't expected. From inside her bag, she took out a small recorder and pressed the play button. Thomas's voice echoed through the workshop. It was a recording of the secret meetings in which he combined the forgeries and the plan to frame Michael. His face instantly paled. Where did you get that? Lauren kept her gaze steady. Let's say your arrogance betrayed you. The two security guards looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Michael watched everything in silence, trying to understand if this meant the end of the fight or just the beginning of something worse. Thomas tried to compose himself. That doesn't prove anything. But his voice was shaking. Lauren took a step forward. Enough evidence for you to be investigated, and if I want, I'll kick you out of the company right now. He approached her, his face just inches from hers, and said in a low tone, You're not going to do that. And why not? She replied, challenging him with her gaze. Because I know secrets, Lauren. His voice was now cold, poisonous. Your family's secrets, from your father, of what happened before you inherited Whitmore. She froze. The air seemed to leave the room. Michael immediately noticed the change in her expression. Lauren took a step back, trying to hide the shock, but the damage was done. Thomas smiled. Yeah, I thought you'd remember that. Michael looked at him, confused. What is he talking about? Lauren looked away. Nothing that matters now. Thomas turned to Michael, taking advantage of the gap. Nothing? Maybe you should know, mechanic. This woman is not so different from me. Her fortune was built on lies, and part of those lies involved the disappearance of an innocent man. Lauren exploded. Shut up, Thomas. But it was too late. The poison was already spread. Michael looked at her in disbelief. That is true. She hesitated. That's not what he's saying. Not exactly. Thomas laughed. Of course, not exactly. There's always an elegant way of lying, isn't there, Lauren? She took a step forward, facing him. My father did wrong things, yes, but I spent my life trying to fix them. And you, Thomas, have spent your life trying to take advantage of them. Michael felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He trusted Lauren, but Thomas's words had planted a seed of doubt. And deep down, he knew that every powerful person has a secret, a hidden life, something he would prefer to leave buried. Thomas noticed the effect and took advantage. Do you really think she's different from me? That this generous billionaire helped you just out of compassion? Michael glared at him. I don't know what you're trying to do, but it won't work. Oh, yes, replied Thomas with a cold smile. Because what destroys good men is not hate. It's the doubt. Lauren looked at Michael, trying to find some sign of trust in his words. Don't listen to him. I never lied to you. Michael took a deep breath. So tell me, Lauren, what really happened to your father? She was silent for a moment too long, and in that silence Thomas realized he had won the round. Lauren finally responded, her voice low. He disappeared after an accident. They never found the body. Thomas completed, triumphant, and an accident that she tried to hide to protect the family name. That's a lie, she replied, but her tone was no longer as firm as before. Chaos seemed to be breaking out in the workshop. Lauren tried to explain. Thomas provoked, and Michael felt that the truth was there, hidden, but shrouded in too many shadows. It was then that one of the security guards, tired of the tension, approached and whispered to Thomas, "Sir, the police are coming." Thomas paled. Lauren looked at him with a half-smile. "Do you really think I would face you without protecting myself?" He took a step back, realizing he had fallen into his own trap. "Did you call the police?" "I called the moment you walked through the door," she replied. The sound of sirens began to get closer, echoing outside. Thomas looked around, looking for a way out, but the security guards hesitated, torn between obeying him and avoiding problems with the law. Michael watched everything in silence, but something burned inside him. The image of the woman he admired was in conflict with what he had heard. Part of him wanted to believe that Lauren was everything she claimed to be. Another part was beginning to fear that the secrets Thomas had mentioned were real. When the police entered, Thomas tried to disguise himself, but the recorder was still on. The voices, the evidence, everything was there. He was taken away under protests, giving both of them hateful looks. As soon as the police car disappeared, silence returned. Lauren leaned against the wall, exhausted. He finished. Michael looked at her for a few seconds before responding. "No, Lauren, this has only just begun." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "He said something that hit you," Michael replied. "Something about your father, and I saw your face. It wasn't fear, it was guilt." Lauren looked away. "Some truths hurt more when they are told by enemies." He took a step forward. "So you tell me before I start believing the lies?" She took a deep breath. "I can't. Not yet." Michael nodded, but his look showed frustration. "Then promise me one thing. Don't leave me in the dark." She looked up. "I promise." He walked to the door, ready to leave. Because secrets, Lauren, always end up coming out. And when they appear, they tend to destroy more than the lie itself. As he left, the sound of rain began to fall outside, as if the universe wanted to wash away the sins of everyone there. Lauren was left alone, with the recorder still on the table, the sound of Thomas's last words echoing in her mind. "Your family's secrets." And in her heart, for the first time, a different fear arose. The fear that the past she had tried to bury was about to return, and this time, with enough force to destroy everything. Now tell me here in the comments, do you think Lauren is still hiding something from Michael? Comment. There are still secrets. If you believe that this story is about to reveal something much bigger than everyone imagines. The rain didn't stop that night. The sound of drops hitting the workshop roof seemed to be the only noise capable of filling the void that was left after Michael left. Lauren continued to stand still, staring into space. The lights in the room oscillated, reflecting off the pieces of metal scattered across the floor, creating shadows that seemed to dance around her. The recorder was still on the counter, and every now and then the echo of Thomas's own voice would come up as she rewound it to listen again. Every word seemed to carry more weight now because he hadn't completely lied. There was something there, a hidden truth, an old wound that she had spent years trying to bury. Meanwhile, Michael walked through the deserted streets. The cold wind blew against his face, but what bothered him most was the whirlwind of thoughts. Thomas's words mixed with Lauren's silence, and nothing made sense. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust, but the doubt was there, poking like a thorn that couldn't be removed. He always believed that the truth, no matter how harsh it was better than silence. And now, her silence hurt more than any lie. On the way back home, he passed by a small cafe that he used to frequent before meeting Lauren. It was simple, with old wooden chairs and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. He went in, ordered a cup, and sat in the corner. He watched the steam slowly rise from the drink, trying to find answers that his heart wasn't ready to hear yet. A lady, who recognized him from television, as his story with the billionaire had gained attention, approached with a curious smile. "You're the guy who fixed that rich woman's car, aren't you?" He smiled slightly. "Yes, I was. I saw that on the networks." The woman sat down without asking permission. "But tell me, is all this really true?" Michael thought for a moment before responding. Everything I did was true de hero. The rest is what people wanted to believe. The woman nodded, understanding. The world loves a hero, but it gets tired of him quickly, even more so when the hero is poor. That sentence stuck in his mind. That was it. Maybe what hurt wasn't Lauren's betrayal, but the cruel reminder that the world never let the simple stay where the power lives. Meanwhile, Lauren drove toward her family's mansion, something she had avoided for months. The house was immense, silent and full of memories. Each room held an echo of the past. Her father's office, her mother's piano, the garden she rarely visited. He walked to the basement, where he knew there were old documents. There was something Thomas mentioned about an accident, and she needed to confirm it with her own eyes. He went down slowly, lighting the way with his cell phone's flashlight. He opened an old iron box and found folders, contracts, accounting records. At the bottom, a yellowed envelope with the name William Whitmore, his father's name. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside, there was a handwritten letter, and in the first few lines, she realized that it wasn't a goodbye, but a confession. The father explained that he had discovered irregularities in the company, that Thomas, along with other partners, had been embezzling money for years. He had tried to resolve everything in silence, but before he could reveal it to the council, he had an accident. The part that stopped her was the final signature. If something happens to me, trust in those who have a clean heart, not in those who have full pockets. Lauren dropped the letter. The tears were flowing, but there was something more, a rekindled flame. Finally, she understood what was at stake. Thomas's power came not just from current manipulation, but from years of buried secrets. While she read on the other side of town, Michael returned to the workshop. He didn't know why, but he felt like he couldn't leave everything unfinished. The rain had eased. The sky was beginning to lighten with the sunrise. When he opened the door, he saw the lights on. Lauren was there, sitting, holding the letter. He stopped at the entrance, surprised. "You shouldn't be here." She looked up, her eyes red. "I found the truth, Michael." He hesitated. "And this time, is it really the truth?" She stood up and walked over to him, handing him the letter. "Read." He took the paper, suspicious. As he read, his face changed. Lauren's father's words made it clear that Thomas was the true villain of this story, and that Lauren, deep down, had also been the victim of a rotten system, supported by lies. "So that's why you stayed silent?" he asked. She nodded. "Because it wasn't just about me. It was about my father, about everything he built. I couldn't let Thomas destroy what little honor was left in the family." Michael took a deep breath. Now it all makes sense. But before they could continue, the sound of screeching tires outside interrupted the moment. Lauren ran to the window. A black car stopped in front of the workshop. The headlights remained on, obscuring vision. Michael approached, instinctively placing himself in front of her. The car door opened, and a man got out. It wasn't Thomas. It was someone older, in a suit, with a cold expression. He introduced himself as Richard Collins, a lawyer for the Whitmore Industries shareholder group. "Miss Whitmore," he said in a courteous tone, "Mr. Reed is under arrest, but the council demands immediate explanations. There are rumors that you intend to transfer control of the company. Is this true?" Lauren maintained her posture. "I intend to restore the company. If that means taking it out of the wrong hands, then yes." Richard watched her with disdain. "Careful, miss. Shareholders don't like emotional plays." Michael stepped forward. "Sometimes the right thing is emotional, and the wrong thing is what seems logical." The lawyer looked at him, surprised. "And you are—" Lauren answered for him. "The only one who still understands what this company should be." Richard smiled wryly. "We'll see how long this lasts." He got back into the car and drove off, leaving a heavy air in the room. Lauren took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "They won't stop." Michael nodded. "Then we won't go either." She looked at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "Why? After everything that happened, why do you still want to help?" "Because someone needs to prove that money isn't everything," he replied. And because I believe that in the end, the truth always wins." She smiled lightly. "You're crazy, Michael." "Perhaps. But sometimes you have to be crazy to keep believing in good." The two were silent for a moment. The sound of rain had already stopped, and the first ray of sunlight came through the window, illuminating the oil-stained floor. It was as if the new day brought, along with light, a chance for a fresh start. But something inside Lauren told her there was more. The letter from his father, the threats from the council, Thomas's shadow, all of this formed a puzzle that was not yet complete, and she knew the next piece was about to appear. Michael turned to her before leaving. "I'll be here if you need me, but if you decide to face the board, don't go alone. They play dirty," she replied in a firm tone. "I learned from the best mechanic in town that even the most corrupt system can be fixed piece by piece." He smiled, and for the first time, the two of them truly seemed on the same side. But outside, inside another car parked on the corner, a man was watching everything. He spoke on the phone in a low voice. "Yes," she found the letter. "No, he hasn't told everything yet." A pause. "Let's let her believe she's winning. When the time comes, you will know what to do." As the car drove away, Lauren turned off the workshop lights and locked the door, without imagining that the real war was just beginning. Now tell me here in the comments, do you believe that Lauren and Michael will be able to beat the corrupt system? Right, truth always wins. If you also believe that good can defeat power, even when everything seems impossible. The following days were a mixture of silence and tension. Lauren knew that what she had done, reopening the case, confronting the board, siding with a simple mechanic, would be seen as an act of betrayal within the Whitmore empire. The family name, prestige, appearances, everything was beginning to crumble. But deep down, she felt that this breakdown was necessary. Sometimes you have to see a castle crumble to understand what really sustained it. Michael, in turn, remained on alert. "I knew there was something wrong, something bigger than anyone they could see." The man observing the workshop that night was not just anyone, and he was right to be suspicious. Over the next few days, strange incidents began to happen. Lauren's car was followed twice, important documents went missing, and an attempted break-in took place at her office. Everything indicated that someone was trying to prevent her from exposing what she discovered. One afternoon, while going through old reports, Lauren received a call from an unknown number. She answered, her heart already racing. On the other end of the line, a calm, menacing male voice said, "Miss Whitmore, the council does not approve of the direction you are taking. There is still time to back down." She was silent, trying to keep her breathing steady. "What if I don't back down?" The voice replied. "Then perhaps the same fate as your father awaits you." The call dropped. The sound of silence after the threat seemed deafening. Lauren stood still, with the phone in her hand, feeling the cold run through her body. For the first time, he understood that he wasn't just fighting for justice. He was fighting for his life. That night, he went to the workshop. Michael was fixing the engine of a truck when he saw her enter. Her look said it all. He dropped his tools. "What happened?" "They called me," she said bluntly. "They know I'm going too deep." Michael took a deep breath. It was to be expected. People like them don't threaten for sport. She ran a hand through her hair, visibly shaken. "Michael, what if what happened to my father wasn't an accident?" He approached. "Do you think the council ordered him killed?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice breaking. "But the more I discover, the more everything seems to point to that." Silence stretched between the two. Michael looked at the car on the elevator and said thoughtfully, "You know what's funny? Sometimes what breaks a machine is not a visibly damaged part, but rather a small loose screw that no one notices. Maybe your father's company went bankrupt for the same reason, a detail that everyone ignored." Lauren watched him, absorbing every word. He was right. There was something small, hidden, that connected everything. Over the next few days, they began investigating together. Lauren had access to old files. Michael, on the other hand, had the look of someone who sees beyond the numbers. He analyzed contracts, invoices, maintenance records for corporate cars, and that's when he noticed something strange. The same name appeared repeatedly in transport reports dating back to before her father's alleged accident. Richard Collins. Michael took the document to her. "Do you recognize that name?" Lauren paled. "He's the shareholder's lawyer. The same one who came here the other day." Michael nodded. "He was involved even before his succession. If your dad was trying to expose something, maybe this guy helped cover it up." Lauren bit her lower lip nervously. "And now he's trying to do to me what he did to my father." That revelation changed everything. They began to put pieces together more carefully. With each new document, with each suspicious connection, the puzzle took shape. Mr. Whitmore's accident, the disappearance of records, the growing power of Thomas Reed, and the involvement of lawyer Richard, all pointed to an internal conspiracy. But the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. One night, Michael arrived at the workshop and found the place ransacked. Tools were scattered, papers were torn, the computer was destroyed. It was a clear message. Stop. Lauren arrived minutes later, panting, with fear written all over her face. "Michael!" "They know." He walked over to her and held her hands. "Let them know. If they try to silence us, it's because we're too close." She looked around, her eyes teary. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me," he responded without hesitation. "I'm not doing this for you, Lauren. I'm doing what's right." His words touched her more than he imagined. For the first time, she understood the true meaning of integrity. It wasn't about status or money. It was about courage. The next morning, the two decided to take action. Lauren scheduled a meeting with the board. "I knew it would be risky, but I needed to face Richard Collins head-on." Michael insisted on coming along, but she refused. "If something happens, I want you to be able to prove everything we discovered." He handed over a flash drive with copies of the documents. "Then take this with you. If they try to intimidate you, remember that you have the truth on your side." When Lauren entered the council room, all eyes turned to her. Richard was at the head with the same cold expression. "Miss Whitmore," he began, "we were surprised by your urgent request." She placed the flash drive on the table. "Here's everything you need to see. The false transactions, the manipulations of Thomas Reed, and the involvement of some names that, for now, I will spare." Richard crossed his arms. "This is a serious accusation." "What you did to my father is serious," she replied firmly. There were murmurs among the council members. Richard kept his tone calm, but his look betrayed irritation. "You have no proof that there was a crime." She pressed the play button on her laptop. The sound of Thomas's recording echoed through the room. His and Richard's voices were clear, discussing eliminating risks. One of the councillors stood up, shocked. Is this real?" Lauren replied. "I gave the copies to the police myself. You can deny it now, but soon there will be no more." Richard stood up, visibly shaken. "You don't know who you're messing with, Lauren." She looked at him without looking away. "I know, yes, with men who think that money buys everything." Meanwhile, outside, Michael waited anxiously. Time seemed to drag by, until he saw Lauren come out, pale, but with an expression that mixed fear and relief. "And then?" he asked. She took a deep breath. "They know they lost control, but they won't fall easily." Michael nodded. "The truth never falls easily, Lauren. She drops it slowly, but when she falls, she doesn't get up again." She smiled tiredly. "My father would have liked you." He looked up at the grey sky where the sun was trying to break through the clouds. Maybe he's still watching. The two looked at each other, aware that this was far from over. The Whitmore empire was about to be divided between the past and the future, between what was and what needed to be reborn. But somewhere, a new piece of this game was moving. Inside a dark office, Richard spoke furiously on the phone. "She challenged me in public." A pause. "Then do whatever it takes. This time, nothing can go wrong." War had been officially declared. "Now I want to hear from you who are following this story. If you were in Lauren's shoes, would you face an entire empire to defend the truth, or would you retreat to protect yourself? Comment below. I would face anything for the truth, to show that you also believe that courage is worth more than any fortune. Dawn fell heavily over the city. Lauren could barely sleep. Richard's words still echoed in her mind. Do whatever it takes. They were more than a threat. They sounded like a sentence. The mansion was silent, but the silence seemed to hide something. Every crack of wood, every distant noise made her heart race. She got up, went to the window and looked at the gardens outside. Everything seemed peaceful, but there was a suffocating feeling that I was being watched. On the other side of town, Michael wasn't sleeping either. He knew Richard wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. The Whitmore Empire was an ancient machine, driven by gears of power and corruption, and Lauren now was the cog trying to reverse the direction of the spin. He was worried about her, not just out of loyalty, but out of something deeper, a connection that had been born in chaos and grown in trust. The next morning, meanwhile, Lauren received an envelope with no return address. Inside was an old photo of his father, with Richard Collins and Thomas Reed, all smiling at a lavish party. Behind the image, a sentence written in pen. Not all enemies start as such. Her stomach turned. That portrait wasn't just a memory. It was a reminder that the betrayals had begun long before she took over the company. She picked up the phone and called Michael. I need to show you something. Minutes later, he arrived at the mansion. The air felt heavy. Lauren was waiting for him in the library, holding the photograph with shaking hands. This changes everything, Michael. My father, he trusted them. Michael studied the photo carefully. And that's why they eliminated him. He discovered something and tried to resolve it from within, but they shut him up. Lauren nodded, her eyes teary. I thought I understood what power was, but the more I see, the more I realize it's a web, and the more you try to get out of it, the more stuck you become. Michael walked over and placed his hand on her shoulder. That's why the truth needs to come out, even if it hurts. Suddenly, the sound of skidding tires outside interrupted the conversation. Lauren ran to the window and saw two black cars pulling up to the main gate. Men in suits came down quickly, talking on their cell phones. Michael went to the door. They are here. She turned pale. Is it the council? Or something worse? He replied. The mansion's security guards tried to prevent entry, but the men presented documents and court orders. One of them approached Lauren and announced coldly, Miss Whitmore, by order of the board and under legal guidance, your position as CEO is temporarily suspended until further deliberation. Lauren remained motionless for a few seconds. Are they taking me out of my own company? The man just replied, for now. Michael stepped forward. This is illegal. No, replied the lawyer with a half smile. It's power. Lauren felt her throat go dry. Everything he had built, the trust he was beginning to regain, seemed to be falling apart again. But deep down, she knew this was just another move by Richard. He wanted to destabilize her, make her back down, convince her to give up. After the men left, she sat on the couch, exhausted. He wants me to break it, Michael. He wants to see me give up like my father. Michael knelt in front of her. Then don't give him that taste. She looked him in the eyes, seeking strength. What if I can't take it? He smiled sincerely. Then I'll take it for you. Those words were what she needed to hear. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in that war. The next morning, Lauren called a press conference. Against all advice from lawyers, he decided to speak publicly about fraud within the company. When she took the stage, the cameras and microphones turned to her. His heart was beating fast, but his voice sounded firm. For years, Whitmore Industries has been a symbol of power and influence. But power, when it lacks ethics, becomes a prison. I discovered that the people my father trusted manipulated accounts, embezzled money, and took lives. Today, I decide to no longer be an accomplice in this. The hall was completely silent. The journalists exchanged looks, surprised. Lauren continued, I know I'm risking everything. I know the price of truth is high. But someone has to pay for it. And it was at that moment that the doors of the hall opened with force. Richard entered, escorted by security guards, interrupting the press conference. "Enough, Lauren," he shouted. "You are destroying the company and your family's reputation." She maintained her posture. "The company is not made of lies, Richard. You are." The flashes started going off. The public confrontation became a spectacle. Richard, enraged, tried to confiscate the microphone, but Lauren held up her father's letter and showed it to the cameras. "It's all here. The evidence, the confessions, and the reason for it all. Greed." The crowd reacted with murmurs. Richard realized he had lost control. One of the journalists asked loudly, "Mr. Collins, do you confirm your participation in the irregularities?" He tried to defend himself, but the cameras had already captured everything. His anger, his despair, the fear streaming through his eyes. Meanwhile, outside, Michael watched everything via live broadcast on his cell phone. Pride mixed with worry. He knew that exposure put Lauren in danger, but it was also the only way to free her from the past. Hours later, the news dominated the portals. Billionaire exposes corruption within her own company. Whitmore Council under investigation. Scandal shakes family empire. The truth began to echo, but with it came the price. At night, when Lauren returned home, she found the mansion's door ajar. The heart races you. He entered carefully and called for Michael, but silence answered. He walked into the living room and saw an envelope on the table. Inside, there was just a handwritten sentence. "You started the war, now bear the consequences." She felt a shiver run down her spine. Before he could react, he heard a noise coming from the back of the house. He ran. The sound was coming from the garage. When he turned on the light, fear turned into panic. Michael's car had broken windows and the interior was stained with blood. Lauren screamed his name but got no response. Despair took over. Hands shook. The floor seemed to spin. He picked up his cell phone and called several times, but it only got voicemail. She fell to her knees, crying, "Michael, don't do this to me." But in the midst of the pain, something inside her awakened. The anger. The feeling of helplessness turned into a strength she had never felt before. If they thought they could destroy her by reaching out to the ones she loved, they were about to find out otherwise. She stood up, wiped away her tears, and looked around as if she could see her father there watching. "I'm going to the end, even if it costs me everything." He picked up the letter again and put it in his pocket. "I knew that there was the key to everything, the past, the present, and redemption." As night fell once again over the city, a new chapter opened. The billionaire's empire was beginning to crumble from within, and Lauren, now more determined than ever, understood what Michael always wanted to say. The truth is expensive, but lying costs the soul. And you, in her place, what would you do? Would you continue fighting even with everything against you, or would you give up before it was too late? Comment below. I would go to the end. If you also believe that true courage is that which is born in the midst of pain. If you've made it this far, it's because you really lived this story with your heart. And this shows that you are part of the people who feel every detail, every twist, every emotion that we create here on the channel. So before leaving, do the following. Leave your like, because it is the fuel that makes new stories reach you. And if you watched until the end, I want to see you in the comments writing the sentence. I stayed until the end, and I believe that the truth always wins. This way I will know that you are part of the group that not only watches, but feels, reflects, and believes in the power of good. Oh, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Right now, activate the bell and come be part of this community that grows with each story. And it's not going away yet. The Chief's next video is already on the screen, and it continues with that same intense and emotional vibe. Click now and find out what awaits you in the next twist.